The Arab world is a loose yet complex amalgamation of 22 countries in which a pan-Arab identity is the proclaimed ideal. Its citizens share a common language, a common history, and believe that they share a common destiny. But in its search for unity, Arab society has been pulled in opposite directions. Past versus present, sacred versus secular, monarchy versus democracy. The collapse of Nasserism as a uniting force and the inability to regain the territories lost in wars with Israel led to the questioning of the secular ideologies that have dominated Arab politics since World War II, with many governments finding it difficult to fulfill their promises in the face of globalization and increased foreign intervention. Islamist movements, long suppressed, are gaining political ground and mass public support. Could Islam be the factor which unites the gap between the dream and reality of Arab unity? The Al-Azhar is one of the most important centers of Islam in the world, attracting worshippers from around the globe. National or linguistic differences mean nothing here. Worshippers come to Al-Azhar both to pray and to study in its theological university. Hundreds have gathered here today to show solidarity with their fellow Palestinian Muslims in their struggle against Israel. The Muslim desire to liberate Palestine is based in part on their desire to win back the holy city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is as important to Islam as it is to Christianity and Judaism, and at times like these, Islam acts as a unifying force with one cause and one goal.
The Arab world will only be united under Islam. Muslims are currently divided, as they have been distanced from their proper belief. Whenever we go back to our true Islamic values, we'll be strong enough to liberate Palestine and force the US to leave Iraq.
Most Arab nations have a vast majority Muslim population, of which Sunni Islam is the largest part. The rest are made up of minorities, such as Shiite Islam and Christian sects. And with the exception of Saudi Arabia, all Arab nations have more or less secular constitutions. But from an Islamic point of view, adherence to Islam means living a life according to Islamic law or Sharia within an Islamic community.
Arab unity differs from Islamic unity. Islamic unity is derived from religion and faith, which is imposed on us by God. What we all have in common is religion, our Holy Quran, and not the Arabic language.
Today, the Arab world is witnessing an increasing demand for the creation of authentic Islamic states.
In Arab unity, you find a lot of personal interest. No one really agrees. And it does not have the influence on us as Islamic unity would.
In the 2005 Egyptian elections, voter results took a sharp turn towards political Islam. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist movement established in the 20s, made a strong showing, even though the party is banned by the government. This popular drive amongst Egyptian voters towards the strengthening of the country's Islamic character is being echoed in many countries across the Arab world.
They belong to a new phenomenon in the region. What's in common would be a reaction to the catastrophes, political and economic catastrophes that had pushed people for a simpler vision.
The Muslim Brotherhood is one of the first Islamist movements in the Arab world, with plans to build an Islamic-based state in Egypt, gradually and through consensus, One of the basic rules of all Islamist movements is to provide social services and fight corruption and inequality, earning groups like the Brotherhood significant popularity with the middle and working classes. This policy has also created a general feeling of solidarity with Muslims all over the Arab world.
As Egyptian Muslims, we don't feel any different from Muslims in Morocco or elsewhere in the Arab world. Islam has no boundaries. Once you're a Muslim, you belong to the wider nation of Islam.
أنا متصور أن الإسلام فعل هذا من قبل. هذا ليس جديداً على توحيد العالم العربي.
I believe that Islam has done this before. This is nothing new.
وأزال ما
It
بين
unified the region for about 14 centuries
الفصائل
والقبائل
والعرقيات اللي موجودة في العالم العربي.
reformed
أزال ما
image of
بينهم
Islam,
التنازع
which
وجمعهم
sees
هذه
all
الفكرة
human beings in
الإسلامية
this part of the world as equals.
الإصلاحية التي
There is
تنادي
pure
بأن يكون
piety
الناس
about this in
كسواسية
these societies.
لا فرق بين عربي ولا عجمي ولا أبيض ولا أسود إلا بالتقوى.
To Islamists, it is Islam which should be the defining feature of Arab nationalism, since it was Islam that created the Arab nation by impelling the original people of the Arabian Peninsula to conquer the area and spread its teachings. The religion has been the founding principle of Arab social and intellectual life for the last 1400 years. And so Islamic law or Sharia, as practiced by the successors of the Prophet, known as the Rashidun or rightly guided caliphs, must be the guiding standard of the nation. The period of the rightly guided caliphs is generally considered a golden age. These first caliphs acknowledged no borders or nations as such, and the Muslim state was a theocracy based on the religious and moral principles of Islam. By the 13th century, Turkish Ottoman sultans assumed the caliphate. But with the collapse of the empire and rise of nation-states at the beginning of the 20th century, the caliphate was finally abolished in March of 1924.
Whichever way you want to look at it, the dream of the Islamists is some form of internal emirate or internal caliphate. And the complete application of the Sharia now with all the connotations.
The wish of Islamists to return to the caliphate has been mainly in response to the men who led the Arab independence movements after World War I. Leaders like Jamal Abdel Nasser were pan-Arab nationalists who advocated the creation of a single Arab nation. But they believed it essential that their countries adopt many aspects of Western civilization, like secular laws and parliamentary government. These views challenge the primacy of Islam in everyday life. For Islamists, Islamic law makes no distinction between religious and temporal power.
The main target is to have the power to organize society, then to go to elections, to make politics, to go to have such power is, in my point of view, is the main target for all the socio-political Islamic movements around the world, not only in Egypt or the Arab world.
So for Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood, there is unity in what needs to be achieved. Their stated aim is the creation of a pan-Islamic state, known as the Ummah, or a nation, transcending all national, ethnic and cultural barriers.
Of course, we are one nation. What unifies us is our religion, Islam. We share a common language, Arabic, but mainly we feel united by Islam. Language comes later.
But at this point in time, there is uncertainty over what sort of nation Arab Muslims aspire to create in the 21st century. Is it a modern nation or a traditional one? It is on the Arab street that the Islamist desire to unite the Arab world in one all-encompassing Muslim nation is largely driven. Since the end of the 1960s, Arabs have not experienced any form of unity, So a lot of effort goes into teaching the next generation on the ways of Islam and its importance as a unifying factor.
They were scattered, they were fighting, they hated each other. Islam is the only element that brought all these peoples together. Centuries ago, we're not talking about now, it happened centuries ago. So it's the only gathering element, I believe, in my opinion.
European colonialism led to a division of the Arab world into individual states. Borders suddenly existed where there were none before. Secular, legal, and political systems were imposed, and religion was relegated to private life. There was a growing fear that the European colonists would influence Arab society, alter Islamic values and traditions, and most importantly, undermine Islamic law. Muslims from all classes of society lobbied to return Islam to its traditional central role. Restoring the Islamic Arab nation, as it was originally intended to be, is the main goal of Islamist groups. They are convinced that Western economic and social values cannot restore past Arab greatness, and that Muslim society must be based on principles derived from its own roots. Rejecting the secularist approach of confining Islam to a relationship between man and his creator, Hassan al-Banna created the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928, with the aim, he said, of ridding Egyptian society from the slavery of colonialism. With the creation of Israel and the defeat of the Arabs in 1948, an element of religious militancy was introduced into the group. Blaming the Egyptian government for the defeat, a young Brotherhood member assassinated then Prime Minister Mahmoud al-Nukreshi inside the Interior Ministry building. Banna was killed by Egyptian government agents shortly afterwards, and many Brotherhood members were jailed. The Brotherhood's fortunes changed for the better with the 1952 Egyptian Revolution, which brought Jamal Abdel Nasser to power, but it was short-lived. On the 26th of October 1954, the Egyptian president was fired at while delivering a speech in Alexandria. The government blamed the Brotherhood. Thousands were rounded up and jailed. Others fled into exile, operating underground, spreading Sunni Islamist ideology throughout the Arab world. Islamist offshoots of the original Brotherhood movement also began to emerge. They became a powerful political alternative to existing conservative regimes who still advocated Western-style nation-states and keeping close ties to the West. The main differences between these new groups was how to bring about the change.
We have to, when we speak about Islamism, to distinguish between at least two big categories. What I prefer to call socio-political Islamic Pacific movements and the religious Islamic movements. The first category is the biggest one, not only in our actual time, but in all the Islamic history. And it is Pacific. And those kind of groups and movements didn't and don't behave violently and didn't adopt violence as a methodological tool to change. For the second category, which is mainly composed by what we can call violent Islamic groups, for them violence is in the center of their ideology. They search by violence to achieve their targets.
Most modern Arabs today believe the Arab world is never going to be a united nation, as it had been hoped in the Arab Revolt of 1916. But something in a more modern context, similar to Europe, each country developing its own identity. And unity in the future must be a unity of sovereign equals.
I'm a Jordanian and I'm proud of it. And I think being a Muslim is an additional strength to my personality as a Jordanian, not the contrary. And we have to do it that way if we want to achieve unity and best relations among Muslim countries.
The spread of Islamist ideology has been aided by several factors. The reverses suffered by secular Arab regimes in their wars with Israel. The gap between the rich and the poor of the region, economic difficulties, and increased urbanization, causing the breakdown of traditional societies and structure. The Arab nation-state is seen as largely having failed its citizens.
We have seen all the experiments in Arab nationalism and everything that is relevant to it. None of this has achieved anything here. On the contrary, everything is getting worse. We are losing our identity. We don't believe in a nation-state.
Some Muslims in the Arab world today unite in favoring a more fundamental approach to rebuilding the Islamic nation, with plans to reorganize societies, rejecting all Western influences.
Ever since the decline of the Muslim nation, people have been preaching for the return of Islam into our lives, just like the Prophet Muhammad did, back to the teachings of the Holy Book. But we are constantly faced with obstacles placed by the West in the path of our goal.
In the 1980s, following the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, many young Arab men decided to join the battle against the Russians. They called themselves the Afghan Arabs, although it was not the term Afghan that united them. Rather, it was the holy war, or jihad, that they were waging against the infidels, the secular Soviets. This period developed a more radical movement in Sunni Islam, known as Jihadi Salafism. Those inspired by this movement include Palestinian Abdullah Azzam, Saudi Osama bin Laden, the Afghan Taliban, and Egypt's Ayman al-Zawahiri, who later joined bin Laden in Al-Qaeda. Many returned to their home countries, fired up from the fight, often with the aim of setting up Islamic states.
مرحلة أفغانستان هي تمثل أول بادرة وحدة حقيقية في هذا العصر. جاءت الناس من جميع أقطار الدنيا، جلسوا مع بعض، جمعتهم شعائر واحدة، جمعهم عمل واحد، جمعهم مشاعر واحدة.
What would bind them together, what would make them feel that this is the same battle, whether you're coming from Egypt or Palestine or Afghanistan or Pakistan or Bangladesh, would be, or the Far East for that matter, would be the affirmation of what you might call an Islamic international, in the same sense that you find American communists would go and die in Spain. So the main bond would be a feeling of belonging to the Islamic Ummah.
Like the occupation of Afghanistan, the US occupation of Iraq has offered many inspired by jihadi Salafism the opportunity to fight US and coalition forces. Young Muslim men from all over the Arab world still flock into Iraq. For them, the battle against the US and Iraqi authorities is considered a holy war, a cause which unites them.
انتهت مرحلة الإسلام الوطني، انتهت مرحلة الوطنية والعلمانية والقطرية والقومية انتهت.
The phase of nationalistic Islam is over. The phase of nationalism, secularism, ideologies and so forth is over. The new current is militant global Islam, global jihadi Islam, which feels attacked by global foreign forces. This calls for a universal Islamic defense.
On the surface, Islam seems the ideal vehicle for unity in the region. However, it is complicated by several factors. Today, Islam is divided between the moderate and more radical points of view, and the moderates see no reason to abolish the nation state.
I don't think unity is the merger of everything. All what we need now is good relations, good neighborliness, some sort of cooperation in certain fields, in economy, in foreign investment, in foreign relations. You know, that every country should keep its identity, its personality.
Another issue is that of minorities. As never before, the majority Sunni Muslim population in the region is facing a rise in Shiite Islam. Historically at odds, the two confessions, along with a Christian minority, don't necessarily share the same vision for unity.
Culturally, Islam is important, in as much as Arabity is important in uniting the Arabs. But I mean, the fact that we speak one language doesn't necessarily, and we have one culture, a similar history, doesn't necessarily in itself produce social forces, political forces that have an interest and the stake and the possibility of unification.
Can Islam encompass the necessary social and political forces that make Arab unity less of a dream and more of a reality? The Arabic language may form the cultural basis which helps bring all Arabs together, but Islam represents potentially an even larger basis of cohesion. Islam takes unity to another level, an international level, beyond the kind proclaimed by pan-Arab ideologues. Islamist movements have sought to foster this wider unity, transcending all other factors. But the enduring presence of political structures and national borders may limit the full scope of Arab unity through Islam.